Dr. Rima, we are live.
I'm so glad because the opportunity to be live is so much better than the opposite. Welcome to the Dr. Rima Truth Reports. I'm Rima Ilebo, MD. I am the medical director of the Natural Solutions Foundation, and I am very, very glad to welcome you to what promises to be a lively, interesting, and highly informative discussion with our guest, Catherine J. Frompovich. First, let me tell you that our principal website is www.drrima, R-I-M-A, truthreports.com, drrimatruthreports.com. With me, as always, my co-host and co-trustee of the Natural Solutions Foundation, a freedom-fighting attorney who has been practicing his craft in the interests of freedom for a very long time and is, in my estimation, a real hero, Ralph Fusatola, JD. Hello, Ralph. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dr. Rima. It's fantastic being here. We have a very interesting guest, interesting things happening. But before we start, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the news, health freedom news over the past week or
Please.
so. And I think the perfect example to lead our discussion is that our good friend Gary Null, Dr. Gary Null, the talk show host, the wonderful nutritionist and naturopath, was censored on Pacifica Radio because he dared to question the given authority on vaccination. It seems that all the forces are aligning, and we have a guest who knows a lot about how those forces are aligning. It's going to be very
You know,
interesting.
let's be very clear. The censorship thing is very interesting. The globalists have decided that we are all to be vaccinated at their command and their demand, without exemptions and without exceptions. And for those of us who drop by the wayside, so be it. For those of us who survive maimed, so be it, with gusto, because then we're good customers for the pharmaceutical industry. And for those of us who are subjected not only to the physical vaccines, but to the behavioral vaccines, which are coming down the road in this mandatory adult and childhood vaccine program, well, so be it, because then we become incapable of saying no to these people who want to depopulate the planet. They say so. I didn't make that up. And who want to control us as slaves, a la Bertrand Russell, by injection, injunction, and nutrition. The ordinary person will be incapable of independent thought. 1922. These plans have been long laid. And these people are quite serious. They're quite crazy, and they're quite serious. And as you said, within 10 seconds of beginning this show, Ralph, it was a wonderful thing that just came out of you as you were preparing for this 2 hour show. You said, do you remember what you said?
No, no.
You said, let's remember we're winning, because if we weren't, they wouldn't be so desperate. And I thought, why didn't you say that when we were on the air? So now I just said it for you.
And it's true. It's actually very true. The very desperation, not just I've noticed that. General Burt wrote about that. And that's why he says reckless disregard. That's what's happening. The
Yes.
globalist circles are engaging in reckless disregard for all of
Now,
us, including
let
themselves.
me stop you for a moment, because
Yeah,
we're going to be talking about reckless disregard with our guest, the
let's
wonderful
bring it.
Catherine J. Frompovich, author, philosopher, thinker, leader.
Investigative
She's
journalist.
amazing. What?
Investigative journalist.
Investigative journalist. But I want to let people know who are not familiar with us that they can go to our website, drrimatruthreports.com. They can enter their email information, and they will receive our newsletters, and they will also receive the opportunity to download the free Vaccine Truth resource ebook with 16 hours of podcast plus articles and references and video resources and so on. Vaccine truth is hard to come by because we're being censored. I'm censored in The Guardian and in the Murdoch papers. I'm not allowed to say anything because what I say is the truth, and they don't want the truth available. Lots of people are being censored. So this is very important. Go to drrimatruthreports.com, enter your email information, and you'll receive a letter back with the download link for this extraordinary resource. I can't wait to bring Catherine on because she only can give us about an hour, and she is a national treasure. Shall we do that? Shall we bring her on?
Now.
Now. Okay, Catherine J. Frompovich, welcome again. Welcome back to the Dr. Rima Truth Reports.
Thank you, Dr. Rima, and thank you, Attorney Ralph. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you and your worldwide guests again, and I hope I can bring to the conversation some tidbits of things to think about. That's my purpose in life, I guess, to prod everybody's thinking. I don't wish to try to convert anybody. I just want to titillate your consciousness and ability to think correctly for yourself.
All right. Well, go for it. Well, let's start off with the fact that you are, of course, an advocate of complete corporate control of our bodies, right?
Oh, wait a minute now. Let's rerun the tape on that one, please. Okay. Corporate control is one of the things that I think has to be in the dustbin of history as soon as possible, if not sooner.
If not sooner.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because the corporation removes responsibility. The very existence of the corporate structure takes away the personal responsibility that people who are putting things in the stream of commerce ought to have. If you're the CEO of a company, you ought to be responsible for what you put in the streams of commerce. The situation is one in which that responsibility is not just not there, but in certain areas like vaccination, it is positively removed. The vaccine companies are absolutely exempt. I mean, their corporate veil is titanium. Yes, so you're right.
I would like to bring something else into the conversation on that. I don't say that, how shall I say, pejoratively, but I think the United States Congress is more to blame than Big Pharma, and I'll tell you why. Congress, who actually works for the U.S. taxpayer and citizen, actually caved into the pressures of big corporations and big pharma in the 1980s and gave them a get-out-of-jail-free card with the Vaccine Act of 1986. And you know what? Humans, children in particular, in the United States and globally, as a result of everyone thinking our CDC knows what is correct, have been paying the unfortunate price for vaccines and mandatory vaccinations. And Congress has to be the one that has to fix it.
Absolutely. I agree almost 100%. It's not Congress that's going to fix it. It's the people who are going to demand of Congress that it be fixed when they say no vaccines, not for me, not for my kid, not for my Aunt Matilda. No, this is not going to happen. I own my body. You want a vaccine? You want to be Paul Offit and take 10,000 vaccines? You go right ahead. No, I will not be vaccinated.
But this is another criteria that I would like to bring into the political arena. And I think it should be a standard question that every wannabe politician must be mandated to answer in writing as part of the platform. What is your stand morally, physically, and legally with regard to certain issues like, number one, vaccines and mandatory all health issues. I mean, in this country, United States in particular, we have a cancer industry that is outrageously ridiculous. And people pay their insurance premiums, are getting ripped off, in my opinion, because some protocols cost $10,000 to $20,000 just for one shot or one pill or one treatment. And then in 4 or 6 months, oh, there's nothing more we can do for you. Go home and get your affairs in order. That is criminal thievery, in my opinion. It's not science, and it's not even consensus science, because the damn stuff doesn't work.
Well, not only does it not work, it's well known that it doesn't work. Every 2 years, McGill University in Toronto conducts a study in which they send graduate students out to ask oncologists, if you or someone in your family had cancer, would you use the chemotherapy that you give your patients? Every single time they do this survey, between 92 and 94% of them say, hell no, of course I wouldn't use it.
So why
Now,
are they pushing it on everybody else?
Well, I'll tell you exactly why. For a couple of reasons. One is that, at least in the United States, oncologists and dialysis doctors are the only two types of doctors who have what's called the concession. If I'm an ophthalmologist and I attempt to sell you glasses or to sell you lenses, contact lenses, without a wall between me and the company that's doing that selling, I go to jail under the Stark 1 and Stark 2 laws. If, on the other hand, I'm a chemotherapy doctor or a dialysis doctor, I am permitted to sell you the drugs that you receive. Now, in terms of dialysis, this is rather interesting because dialysis doctors are trained in Europe and the United States, Canada. They're all trained together on the same equipment at the same universities with the same drugs. And yet European dialysis patients have 1/6 the mortality of U.S. dialysis patients. So a study was done, and I believe it was published in the British Medical Journal, if I'm not mistaken. And they said, how come? And they discovered that the European doctors use 1/6 the drugs, and therefore the patients die 1/6 as often. So they went back and they did a second study, a follow-up study with the American doctors trained in the same places, using the same drugs and same machines, techniques, and technologies. And they said, do you believe that your choice of whether or not to use these drugs for your patients, and of course they die 6 times as often, doctor, do you believe that your own self-interest as the profit-making person in this chain of supply has anything to do with the choices you make? And 100% of them said, of course not. It's for the patient's own good.
Pardon me for laughing.
It's really scary. Hey, here we go. Voltaire said, to learn who rules over you, simply find out who you are not allowed to criticize.
Exactly. And that brings us to the issue of controlled opposition. We get attacked, we get hacked, we get damaged, we get banged consistently. Catherine does. Her computer is eaten alive by these goons. Ours today, I tried to get into my website, and it, of course, was down again, drrimatruthreports.com. All the time. Happens all the time. We get serious jamming going on. We even have an audio file of the jamming signal that's been used against us here at veteranstruthradio.com, a wonderful, non-censored, free speech radio station, by the way, that deserves your support and your enthusiastic listening. Well, we have this documentation. It's not our imagination. We get hit with one kind of attack and another because we are not controlled opposition. The controlled opposition, they say what the other side wants them to say, and they are allowed to say it, oddly enough. So, we always say we have all the right enemies because we're doing our job. Talk about hacking and attacking, Catherine.
Oh, well, how far do you want me to go back? I've been
Oh,
an activist since the 1980s. And at one point in my 1980s, I was for 5 years executive director and legislative advocate for a national coalition working for the implementation of of an amendment to the United States Constitution, which, if we would have gotten, would have precluded all this stuff, and everybody was working against us. I must say, everybody thought we were nuts. It was the Health Care Rights Amendment that would guarantee everybody the freedom of choice to, and no laws that would be made by government to disallow parents and their children the right to choice of their health care. All right. We lived on 3 acres in Upper Bucks County, out in the middle of the Goonies. No street lights, nothing. But do you believe back then I had people going through my trash cans 1, 2 o'clock in the morning? And it surely wasn't street people looking for food.
got it. Got it. Absolutely.
And then when I was in private practice as a nutritionist, I must have hit a nerve someplace very early in my career. I don't know why. But I had a gentleman who came to me. He was with it was Beltel then, I think, before it was broken up or whatever. And when he would call me on the telephone, he said, "I'm hearing something strange on my phone in the conversation. I think your line is tapped." I said, "Hey, you work for the phone company. You find out and tell me." So he comes back for a visit to, consultation. And he says, "Yeah, your phone's tapped, but I can't tell you who's doing it." I said, "I know who's doing it. You don't have to tell me." And this has been going on and now with the computers, it's just unbelievable. Your information does not get through to me at all. I do not receive National
Natural Solutions Foundation.
Yes, emails or newsletters. I can't tell you how many times I have subscribed to it. I've given up already because it just doesn't go through or whatever. I write for Activist Post, and as I said earlier, I think that yesterday they were down, their servers were down, and they come out of Costa Rica. There is all kinds of interference, but here's something very interesting that I have found, and anyone who is into what we would call truth searching, but what I like to call as factual scientific searching, because in my opinion and philosophy, truth is perception. Because I'll tell you why. There's a difference between truth and facts. Facts stand on their own cognizance and they cannot be disputed. Truth is like a religious belief system. Hey, the pro-vaccine industry believes they have the truth, but they have consensus science, which says that, yes, the truth is there, that these things can be given to newborns, 2 months, 4 months, 6-month-olds, and nothing's going to happen to their little brains or bodies. And yet we have kids dying from SIDS, SUDS, and all kinds of horrendous neurological diseases and syndromes that we didn't have anywhere on the radar as late as 1970s, and that's autism. So truth and science are 2 different things, or 3, and perception. Okay? So for truth, what we would like to call as truth seekers, you've got to realize that once you start hitting onto certain websites, your computer is going to be tagged. And I'll tell you who's doing it. Your security package. I have Norton 360. And every time I get a prompt from them, my computer is automatically locked. I can't do anything but shut it off. Interesting?
Absolutely. These mega conglomerates are very, very happy to work with the government and give the government anything it wants. Why? Of course, they're regulated by the FCC, and so it's a hand in glove, one hand washing the other, but they're also inter-owned. They're also inter-owned. And that's very, very important.
It's follow the money, Dr. Rima.
Absolutely. But, there's another part. The money is the easy part. Okay, so vaccines are a moneymaker. Yes, indeed they are. Paul Offit, we estimate, probably collected somewhere around $48 million the first year that Rototech was approved by the committee on which he sat. So perhaps he had just a little conflict of interest,
And he did not. He
but
did not recuse himself and not
he
vote.
did not.
Wow, that's just amazing when you think about it.
But it's not amazing, because when you think about it, the entire committee of every one of these approval processes is compromised in the same way, so much so that the federal government had to change the rules for what a conflict of interest is. They used to say if you had a conflict of interest, you couldn't be in the decision-making process. Now they say you have to reveal the conflict of interest, and then you can be in the decision-making process.
Right.
Exactly.
I think the proper rule is you have to reveal and you cannot be in the decision-making if you're going to be on a public body. But what really worries me is that it's not just these individuals. The United States government is also a patent holder in this area. And I believe it's the HPV
vaccine in particular.
They get money out of every dose. That's really important to understand here.
If the flu vaccine is used according to the CDC recommendations this year, the flu vaccine that is less than 23% accurate, and it doesn't even work, and it's very dangerous, and it gives you the flu, that one. If the flu vaccine is used according to CDC recommendations, the United States government will rake in a minimum of $100 million. Now, that may sound like nothing when you think about government-sized wallets, but it's actually it's chump change, but it's useful chump change. And when you think about the fact that the more than 50% of the operating budget of the FDA comes from the user fees which are paid by pharmaceutical corporations for the FDA to approve their drugs, making the FDA a client of the pharmaceutical corporations. And then you think about another 100 million or 150 million hopping into their coffers. That's just from the flu vaccine. That says nothing about all the other vaccines. When you consider that vaccine doses cost approximately 5 cents to make, but a vaccine dose for Gardasil is what, $179
for one shot.
For one shot, and there are 3 shots. We're talking about a considerable amount of money.
Between $500 and $600.
That's right, per damaged girl. One more.
Are you saying that every single girl who receives that toxic jab is going to be damaged to some degree or another?
I'm saying that every single person who receives any vaccine is damaged. We are all vaccine damaged. The reason some of us are still functional is we didn't receive 60 vaccines by the time we were 5. We didn't receive 34 doses by the time we were 4 months old. We didn't receive that. But how much can the human being, not genetically adapted for this kind of toxic load, how much can the human being tolerate before the collapse, the damage, both genetic and non-genetic, makes itself manifest? But we are all vaccine damaged. We are all poisoned by these insane injections. And I would go back for 1 second to the idea of the injection. Vaccination is founded in pus and deceit, and it remains rooted in pus and deceit, filth and deceit. The idea that you can inject toxins into people's bodies and induce health is fundamentally nuts. It's also scientifically flawed, and the antibody hypothesis upon which vaccination rests is totally flawed.
I used to tell my clients when I was in private practice as a nutritionist, and I used to be in physicians' offices also, you can't poison a body into wellness.
Precisely.
Right.
Yes. speaking about vaccines, are you aware of SaneVax about a week ago put out 3 stories about 3 women in their 30s?
Yes.
Are you familiar with that, Dr. Rima?
We put out the SaneVax's link to that amazing article on our Twitter feeds. We have 2 Twitter feeds, and I urge the people who are listening to follow us. One Twitter feed is one Twitter feed is at Dr. Rima Laibow, DrRimalaibOW, and the other is at Health Freedom US.
Could you just titillate your listeners' interest about those 3 women? They came down with cervical problems, which were supposed to be alleviated by the vaccine, correct?
Let's make really, really clear that, first of all, HPV does not, I repeat, does not cause cervical cancer.
Yes, and there are about 140 strains of HPV.
Yes, and none of them cause cervical cancer. Every woman, statistically speaking, during her life will have HPV. It is a normal part of the flora at various parts of a woman's life. It will resolve in something like 98, 99% of the cases spontaneously within 2 years. Resolve means goes away. It goes away. And it goes away while tuning the immune system. The immune system has to respond to viruses, bacteria, and so on in order to stay in its humming Ferrari-like state, so it knows how to respond to things. And HPV is one of those viruses that helps to tune the immune system. Now,
so are some of the childhood diseases.
Absolutely.
Some of the childhood diseases designed for that.
I would say all of them. We know that people who have measles acquired from the community infection route, which means you get it from somebody else in the community, those people have less cancer in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. We know that having the opportunity to have a brief 3-day fever as opposed to suppression of your immune system for the rest of your life actually enhances health. So we need these experiences to train and tune our immune system. So the women who have HPV might also have cervical dysplasia, which is a precancerous lesion, most of which resolves anyway. You remember that our bodies create about 10,000 cancerous cells a day, and in general the immune system goes along and says, out of here, takes care of it. So there may be some cervical dysplasia that gets caught on a pap smear, and the woman also has HPV. But since women will have HPV, these 2 things are going to happen at the same time. Doesn't mean that the HPV caused the cancer or that the cancer caused the HPV, which is equally illogical. Now, the vaccine causes damage. If you have HPV and a cervix, we're not talking about boys who are getting
well, that's
a vaccine.
That's a different reason.
Yeah, well, allegedly. If you have HPV and if you have HPV and you get the vaccine, your chances of developing cancer rise by about 46.7%. In other words, having the vaccine almost doubles your cancer chances. And these 3 women developed cervical dysplasia and cervical cancer, they believe, as a direct result of the HPV vaccine. And I believe it right along with them.
Can I just share with you, when I was in private practice, I used to have physicians refer their clients to me for various reasons, all right? And many of the women, as you have just said, on pap smear, would come with a 3 or and even a 4 reading on of dysplasia. I tell you, not a lie, and I tell you the facts. Getting them on a completely revised diet and a nutritional supplementation program in 4 months when they went back and had a new pap smear, perfect. Now, isn't that coincidental?
Coincidental.
It's not coincidental. What it says is if you feed the body what the body needs for optimal functioning, it will, you ready to be surprised? Function optimally. If you get rid of the toxins, which an organic, clean, well-balanced diet does, get rid of the toxins, the body can get rid of the problems caused by the toxins. If you get rid of the genetic impediments, the epigenetic impairments, then the body will regulate its genetic function, produce the proper proteins instead of producing the carcinogenic or cancer-generating proteins, and it will work well.
Yes, but that leads me, Dr. Rima, to something that I think I would like to bring into our conversation. Currently, we are having so much in the way of toxins coming at the human that it's just absolutely impossible. But I would like to offer that it is more critical than ever to keep as pristine a diet as you possibly can, and to almost like religiously perform detoxification of your body every several months, maybe 4 6 months. Every 4 6 months, do a 3-day to 4 5 6 day cleanse, because we're just getting super saturated with all the stuff that's up in the sky, those lines and what people think are contrails. They're not. They're chemicalization of the weather geoengineering patterns that are going on.
Let me stop you there for a second, Catherine. We've had Dane Wigington of Geoengineering watch on our show a number of times. He's a wonderful, wonderful
yes, he and I are friends.
Truth teller. Wonderful guy. And he says there is no real weather, no normal weather left on the planet. But I want to say something about contrails. There is no such thing with a modern jet plane as a contrail. They no longer produce contrails. So anything no longer, ever, the vapor characteristics have been changed. So there are no more contrails. So anything you see in the sky coming out of the back of an airplane and lingering, anything, is a chemtrail, is geoengineering, which is now being admitted. For years and years, we were scoffed at and derided and told that we were insane and blah, 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 when we said that these things were chemically saturated material flows, and that they were dumping toxins and viruses and synthetic biology and radioactive material on us. People said, "My God, you are crazy. That is a conspiracy theory." And then the U.S. government General Accounting Office said, "Yeah, we actually do that, to tell you the truth." And then now it's taught in high schools. It's taught in colleges. It's acknowledged, and it's talked about as the
norm for the future.
The thing that we should do to help the planet along.
Exactly. It's a green college course, and you can. I understand now that there are a couple of colleges that have degree programs in this very thing, with manipulating the weather.
As if that were okay.
Right.
How about a college degree in annihilating the planet?
Right.
How about a college degree? How about a college degree in depopulation technology?
If it's science, it must be true.
I think there is one in that. You know what it's called?
Medicine.
Well, no, I'd say genetic engineering.
Oh, without a doubt. There are many roads in to depopulation. Many of them. There are the 5 doors, and if you go to our website, drrimatruthreports.com, you'll see an image of 5 doors. Drugs and vaccines, a door to depopulation. Radiation, nuclear energy, a door to depopulation. Chemtrail, geoengineering, a door to depopulation. Industrial food with chemicals and no nutrients that does not support life, a door to depopulation, genetically modified organisms, GMOs, a door to depopulation. These are the 5 technologies that we call genomicidal. They are designed to destroy your genetic capacity to reproduce and to live because of the intentional genetic, the intentional reduction of the population that the elites have decided would be best for us, those of us who die and those of us who remain as their servants and slaves. They're very clear about it. Yes, Catherine, what were you going to say?
I'd like to add a 6th door to that, if I may, please.
Go for it.
Electromagnetic frequencies, EMFs, and the non-ionizing radiation that comes out of most of the smart gadgets and smart meters.
Excellent point. Talk about that. You know an awful lot about it. Tell our listeners why you think, and I think you're right, that there's a 6th door.
Well, this has been going on for, I guess, right around the end of the Second World War. After the United States and the Allies found what they found in Europe and in the former Third Reich, there was a lot of advanced, what you would call advanced technologies. And that's when all of the stuff with pharmaceuticals and chemicals and pesticides took off like greased lightning. Because under Project Paperclip, the United States government brought over Hitler's ex-scientists, gave them carte blanche and said, make the same damn stuff for us here and you're free, you're okay, you're not a criminal. And that's when everything started to expand in the technological area, including electromagnetic field energies and so on and so forth. Now, there is a network called the smart grid that they're trying to build the entire world into, even to the point of a one controlling factor for the entire population and entire countries that will be condensed into one controlling factor. I find that personally very offensive and mind-boggling, but with the technology that they have, I'm sure that maybe they can accomplish it. Some of the gadgets, put that word in quotes, that they implement to put this into reality are all the smart gadgets, your smartphone, your smart TV. I guess most people listening to this conversation may not be aware of that their smart TV, particularly a Sony, a Samsung, could actually take out of the room where the people are watching a TV program the conversation and send it back to wherever or whomever wants to have it.
Oh, absolutely. And let me point out that we did an experiment. Shari Edwards works with vocal profiling and voice print information, and we use her technology in our practice and have vetted it over many years. We've known Shari since 1992, and she's a real pioneer. Her technology is called human bioacoustics. And I said to her, Shari, these new digital TVs, this was when they were new, these new digital TVs that everybody had to have, that suddenly became a priority, what are they doing? I believe that they are emitting and they are entraining brain waves and physiology. Let's find out. So she has oscilloscopes and other technologies to do this. So she did an experiment. She did a voice print of her grandchild, her husband, herself, and I believe her daughter, her grown daughter. And then they all watched television for an hour. and she did another voice print of all of them. And what she found was they all were now permeated with the identical extraneous inserted frequencies. And I said, well, what are these frequencies about? What do they do? What are the characteristics? And she said, well, first of all, they trigger diabetes. This is a frequency that is associated with the development of diabetes, which is now epidemic. They trigger a servile attitude of wanting to help and serve somebody else with no thought for your own well-being or regard, kind of malignant altruism, if you can imagine such a concept. And they also trigger cancer. Do we have an epidemic of cancer? And then I found other evidence of exactly what you're saying to go along with this, that they are listening devices as well. So they are receivers and they are emitters. And my suggestion is, I don't have a television in my home. I won't have a television in my home.
Neither do I.
But if you feel you must have a television in your home, unplug the sucker when you're not using it, and use it as little as you can possibly manage to use it.
Don't park the kids in front of it for entertainment or a babysitter.
Absolutely not. And I would suggest you not park yourself in front of it unless you like cancer, diabetes, servile behavior, and whatever else they choose to put in, because today it's those frequencies. Tomorrow, I don't know. Neither do you. It's like a vaccine dose. I know what the label says. I know what the package insert says because I can read. But what's actually in them? That's a very interesting story.
Oh, maybe undeclared monkey virus.
Maybe undeclared monkey virus as...
It is outrageous.
Exactly.
98 million people dosed with a cancer-causing virus, and nobody says nothing. Except for, I guess, those of us who are saying it. It's extraordinary.
And Congress in 2003, Ralph, admitted that in a hearing.
Well, and the CDC put it up on their website and said, yep, we knew about it, but we did not want to, and this is a quote, burden the manufacturers of the vaccines with additional financial costs. Now, they have no liability. They're making money not only hand over fist, but Everest over Everest. And the CDC, ever loyal to the corporate interest, did not want to burden them with something that might have added 4 cents or less per dose that already costs only 5 cents. They didn't want to require a single pass filtration in order to remove the SB40 virus that they knew about. Now, SB40 is named because there are 39 SB simian viruses in front of it. And how many after? Well, we know of about 48 more. I know of about 48 more. There may be many, many, many more. So what we're talking about is...
Dr. Rima, are you with us still?
Hello? Did we lose you?
What we're talking about, is total disregard of the well-being of the populace and the well-being of the corporations, and the depopulation well-being, the program well-being, is what's actually being served. That's an exaggeration. All you have to do is scrape the data, scrape down past the veneer of lies, and it jumps out at you like a cockroach.
Okay, Dr. Rima, let's keep going on with this EMS stuff. There's something even more ridiculous. It's called smart meters that everybody is going to be mandated to have on their house for their electric power. Or if you don't and you refuse, you will have electricity cut off and you won't have electricity. I'm in that battle now here in Pennsylvania because of refusing what's called a AMI smart meter. And what this does now, and I think the listening audience has to perk up their ears a little more and listen very carefully, because this is the facts about smart meters. It's a two-way system. It's based on microwaves that emit information that's collected in the house and sends it out to the electric power company and others. Plus, there is information that comes into the house, into the meter, from the electric company, which can do a few things. Number one, interact with all smart appliances in your house. Number two, control your usage of electric power for whatever reason the power company or the operator or whomever decides. For example, right now we're in the summer heat in the northern hemisphere, and I'm in the suburban Philadelphia area. Supposing we have 102 degrees and everybody's got their air conditioner cranked up, they can send the message to every centrally controlled house, air conditioned or whatever, or appliance in the house, and say, brown out. You can't do a thing about it. Plus, the other thing is the information relay that goes out over these microwaves. And you see, I don't know where you are in Chile if they have large microwave towers, but they're cropping up here in the States like mushrooms after a spring rain.
Sadly, they are everywhere.
All over.
Sadly,
everywhere.
This is part of the control system and the mechanism that's going to be implemented for this worldwide control. And even I'm hearing, and I can't validate yet, but I'd say where there's smoke, there's got to be something smoldering. Mental, emotional, brain wave control. These cell towers are going to be able to send out various wavelengths that are going to be able to impact an individual in many, many different ways. Right now, they're just being used, from what I understand, for telephones, cell phones, and for the smart meter information. Now, the utilities, they could be gas, electric, or water, can have smart meters on them, all right? So what happens is people are just going to be, how shall I say, inundated with all this electromagnetic frequencies that are going to be interfering with the pulse rate of every cell in our body. Some of the information wavelengths that will come into the house can possibly send in microwaves. So there's the possibility that living in your house, it could be like living in a microwave oven. They don't care.
No, it's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't care. Remember, the goal is not to keep us healthy. The goal is not to keep us high functioning. The goal is to weaken and rid themselves of us.
As quickly as practical. But not so fast that we notice what's going on.
Let me just share this with you. And I wish, I was trying to find it before I came on the radio show with you, but I couldn't. I've got so many files to look through. I came across a chart not too long ago about the projected world population by a country, and each country for, I think it was the year 2025. And each country that I checked on, and in particular the United States, was so dramatically reduced, I was in shock. I was trying to figure out why. We now have about 320 million people in the United States. The projected population for 2025 was down to 86 million.
Good
Hello?
God. Good God Almighty. Can you send it? Can you send us the link to that?
I'm looking for that. I'm trying to find it and I can't. Let me tell you something. This is one of the things that happens to my computer. Files get erased.
Well, mine too. Mine too. I had an email today that, as far as I know, has no political or social justice or medical meaning at all. It was a useful email from somebody here in Chile who sent me some data that was helpful in my office situation. And I looked at it and I filed it in its appropriate place on my computer, and it's gone.
Yeah,
gone.
I have that all the time. I have that all the time. And you know what else I also have? I can be writing an article and it will just disappear. I had a 2-page article written and I have a minute save on my word processing, for writing in Word.
Oh, let me tell you a story about that. Years ago, when I was just starting to really rely on the computer, I was still living back in New York State. I had written, I can tell you when it was 2005. I had written a book, and it had taken me 7 days. I had been up for 5 days straight. I laid down for 1 hour on the rug because the rug was uncomfortable, and I thought that'll keep me from sleeping a long time because I needed to finish it. And then I was going to finish the last chapter, which I considered to be the most important chapter, and take the book to the local print shop and get the copies that I needed for the trip that I was about to make and to Africa, sharing this book with ministers of health and presidents of countries and so on. The book was about Codex Alimentarius. And so I said, okay, I will save this chapter, the most important final chapter, in 5 places on my computer. And that way I'll be able to find it. And I lay down for an hour of sleep. I got up and I went back to my computer, and it was gone from place 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And I was devastated. It was, as I said, the most important chapter of the book. And I searched and searched, and ultimately I called in a documents recovery specialist, and he was very expensive. He spent 16 hours straight sitting at my desk, and I was saying, well, and finally he said, this is the most professional job of this type I've ever seen. I can see the footprints of the people who've been in your computer all over your computer, and I can see exactly where the document was taken, but there's no way I can retrieve it. No trace remains. And I said, well, who did it? And he said, I don't know. I can't see anything that tells me who they were. He said, I've been doing this for 16 years professionally, and I've never seen a job this good. And I thought, yes, I must be doing a good job.
Right.
I had that happen also, and they're called basement files, okay? And my computer tech guy says within 24 hours, you're usually a good techie can usually recover what are called basement files. And he did that for me one time, but I think they have upped the ante on my computer, so I don't know where anything goes. And I'm tired of spending money after it, so I just forget it, leave it go, that's it. So
well, there's something else. I said to this guy, well, how do I keep this from happening again? How does this, what do I do? Ah! And he said, you get a thumb drive and you put it on a string around your neck. And if they want it, they have to kill you.
Let me tell you something. You want to know something? I would do everything on thumb drive. And guess what? About 2 months ago, I get a prompt that my thumb drive now is now connected to the internet.
Oh.
Whoa!
Yes, I thought I would make you happy.
Whoa! Wow! That's exciting.
So
Isn't
that
it?
means
I
that
you
the
know,
new,
you know
that
what?
means
I
that,
got it
I don't know.
well, that means that your thumb drive operating system was automatically upgraded to a new system that oh so nicely connects you to the internet automatically.
Yes, that's it. So anyhow, but listen, so I had this 2-page article done that I was going to submit to Activist Post, and I had it saved, and I came back to edit it, because I edited it at least 2 or 3 times before I sent it in, because each time you look at it, you see something you want to change. And damn it, pardon my French, isn't there, when I opened the thing, the half of the first line of the entire 2-page article, that was all they left me.
Wow, let's let you know they can
Wow.
cut it off. And talking about cutting it off, we are now in the last minute of the first hour of the Dr. Rima Truth Reports, brought to you over Veterans Truth Network, VTNradio.com. Catherine Frompovich is the guest. Catherine, please tell people about the best website to go to read your writing and that sort of stuff. And, you can stay with
Okay.
us. You can stay with us into the second hour if you have time.
I have to go do some food shopping because one of the May Day participants, Susan, is coming tomorrow, and I have to go
awesome.
get some food.
Yes, please.
So I want to do
Take
that.
good care of her. She is also a national treasure.
Yes. Okay, I write for activistpost.com, ACTIVIST post.com. My name is Catherine, CATHERINE, J. Frompovich, FROMPOVICH. I have 4 books on the internet on Amazon.com. Just Google my name and Amazon.com for books, and you will be able to see them. And my website is my name, www.catherinejfrompovich.com. And it's been a pleasure being with you folks. I wish you well. And I hope that very soon we could say, you know what, they're a thing of the past.
We
Indeed.
all hope so. Catherine, it's been wonderful having you. We want you back soon. You are a mine of information and articulate it well. Activist Post, Catherine J. Frompovich. You want to go there. You want to be informed and motivated by Catherine. Thank you so much, Catherine. Have a lovely weekend.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right. Wow, wasn't that exciting? She is a really interesting person.
She is. She's absolutely delightful. She's knowledgeable. She's forthright. There were several issues that we wanted to talk about, but there was no way there was going to be time. So obviously, Catherine comes back. We have more vigorous conversation. By the way, sometimes we disagree, but on the issues that we've been talking about, we agree completely. Catherine could be saying it, or we could. The fact is that belief and science have nothing to do with one another. And whether we're talking about smart meters being toxic, or whether we're talking about vaccines being dangerous, the science is the science. And at least in terms of vaccines, well, actually, and EMFs, the science is settled. They're really, really, really dangerous. They have no place in human life. None, none, none.
And Dr. Rima, I suggest that when we're ready to begin our second half, we talk to people a little bit about some of the ways they can support the foundation. But I thought I would give you a little surprise. As you know, we've been getting ready to bring out the new website, the new upgraded website at drrimatruthreports.com. And so we've been doing some things with some of the old archived websites. And I came across this, which I thought you might find entertaining.
Sneaking up on our freedoms, destroying our health, shredding the Constitution, taking away our wealth. But we're the
women
following
shine
freedom's
freedom's
trail.
trail.
Following where
Where
the
they
truth
train,
leads,
they
we will
will
prevail.
prevail.
How
All
lovely.
right. So I found it. It's still on the internet where it's supposed to be. And this is the Dr. Rima theme song from a couple of years ago. And it's perfectly great. It's perfectly great. So I just thought I'd let you know about it and put it on the chat here so our friends at Veterans Truth Network can get their hands on it.
Thank you so much.
All right.
The recording, that's a very, very strange thing. The recording was okay for a while, and then it began to sound like an old 33 and a third record that had gotten chipped or was being played with a needle that was worn, and I cannot figure out how an electronic file, an MP3 file, gets to sound like it's worn out.
Well, but that's the sound you wanted, though. It was probably the particular microphone, but that's a great sound because it's like a battle song from something that might have happened back in the 1930s.
Yeah, it sounds like a female Woody Guthrie.
Sort of. Well, that's good. That's
Yeah,
really good. I like that. Woody
good.
was interesting. Hey, you've said, Dr. Rima, you have said the side that has the best songs wins.
Absolutely.
You have said
That's why I wrote the song. I got to tell you something really funny. We have somebody working for us here in the Chile office named Salvador, who is very much involved with our social media. He's helping us move into the 21st century from the 14th century in terms of how we communicate via Twitter and Facebook and so on. And he's lovely. He's also a musician. I met him because he's my guitar teacher. And I said, by the way, do you know anybody who could help us with this who's bilingual? And he said, yeah, I think I could. And he's doing a lovely job. Well, and he just updated the front of the app, our push notice app. You should tell people how to get that, and then I'll tell you the rest of what I was going to say.
Yeah. Well, folks, if you go to http://tinyurl.com/health freedom app, you will get to the right page. You'll get to a page that actually gives you very clear instructions on how to get the app on your iPhone, on your smartphone, on your iPad, on your Android. If you use those devices, then you already know that you're going to go to the App Store and you're going to search. What you're going to search for is health freedom as one run-on word. And if you do that, you will actually get our free app. And what does that do? It allows you to have, from your smart device, it allows you to have access to the different features of our website. And as the new website comes out, those features are going to be getting very much updated and wonderful to use. And it allows us to do something. It allows us to send push notices. It allows us to send certain types of push notices that, as we develop the push notice system, will become more and more useful. For example, we can send a push notice to everyone who has the app anywhere on the planet, and it gets to them in split seconds. It might be very useful in giving people timely information. But we can also send push notices to specific geographic areas anywhere on the planet. That would also have some very beneficial possibilities toward keeping people up to date about what's going on. And so I think it's time to get the app. We've just begun to develop the uses of it, but we know that the 21st century, the personal computer, and all that stuff will seamlessly meld into your personal communication device, which will be built around what we used to call a cell phone. So I think it's great to get it while it's free. Go to the App Store from your device, search for Health Freedom as one word, and you will get the app.
Health freedom is one word, and health freedom is one thing. Your health and your freedom are intimately connected. There is no distinction. Your first freedom is health freedom. If someone else owns your body, if someone else controls your body, then you have no freedom. All the others are irrelevant. You are a slave. The ownership of the body if you will, the habeas corpus at a deeper level determines whether you have any freedoms. This freedom has been ignored by most of the freedom advocates, not all of them. In Australia, the first country to, well, actually the second country to take away child support benefits for parents who choose not to vaccinate their children.
That's not a done deal in
Australia,
Australia, Dr. Rima. There's going to be
was
major protests and all,
yes,
and
but
we'll talk about that
let me
later.
finish
Yeah,
the thought. Let me
of
finish
course.
the thought, Ralph, before we talk about the protests, which are very important. There, in the Constitution, it memorializes and enshrines the principle of informed consent without coercion, duress, or force. And yet here in this country of Australia, where informed consent is a constitutionally guaranteed right, parents are being told that they lose their constitutionally guaranteed support for every child, $16,000 for each child, taken away if they choose not to toxify their child's body, either because of the child's medical condition or the parent's beliefs, religious, ethical, otherwise. And so what we have is the state determining that these children's bodies belong to the state. And if that's okay with you, you're listening to the wrong radio show. It's not okay with us. The Dr. Rima Truth Reports, and indeed the Natural Solutions Foundation, is dedicated to the proposition that your body belongs solely to you.
Exactly. And by the way, even if the state did own, whatever that might mean, our bodies, the way we might own a companion animal, it doesn't mean that the authorities can torture us just like we can't torture our companion animals. There are limits to which all civilized people are held, and they are transgressing the limit. This is so important to understand. Informed consent is not a new idea. Informed consent reaches back thousands of years to the Hippocratic Oath. Quite clearly, it says that doctors in that oath say they will not administer poisons. They will not act against the conscience of their patients. It's very clear, and that's been the law, the humane law, international law, for millennia. It's been encoded most recently after World War II. Now, as they say, wars have consequences. And one of the consequences of World War II were clear standards that were enshrined with the blood of 50 million war dead. And those standards are written in a number of international agreements that occurred just after the war and within a couple of years thereafter. And they include the United Nations Universal Declaration on Rights, the Nuremberg Code, which is not to be confused with the Nuremberg Charter, having to do with aspects of the war crimes trials that were held in Nuremberg in Germany after the war. The big Nuremberg trial, the one of the surviving Nazi leadership, that was held under the international charter, and it was held by an international tribunal made up of the victors, in which, of course, only the losers were charged with crimes. And that was followed by a series of trials run by the United States, because Nuremberg was in the United States zone of occupation, in which various groups were put on trial as part of the denazification program. And the most famous of those so-called subsequent Nuremberg trials is the doctor's trial. And for the doctor's trial, the court very carefully constructed something called the Nuremberg Code with input from major scholars. It's very interesting to read about the process, the international and the U.S. military tribunals in Nuremberg after the war, because there was, in many ways, an attempt to be fair in some formalistic sense, and there was an understanding by the people who were doing all this that they were doing something that was setting international precedent. And of course, in terms of the Nuremberg Code, the Geneva Convention is very clear. If a prevailing party puts a defeated party's members on trial for crimes, it can only use a law against them that would apply to its own people. And so by promulgating the Nuremberg Code and trying the Nazi doctors on that code, the United States is bound by the Geneva Convention to abide by the same code. And it's that code that they're violating by not allowing informed consent, truly informed consent. And the code is very clear about the lack of duress. It's not enough. It's not, it's not enough not to hold a gun to someone's head and engage in medical interventions. That's not the only thing that it forbids. It forbids all forms of duress, deceit, and the like. The words that Dr. Rima used earlier, those words, there's a little list of them that appear in the Nuremberg Code, and they're well known in medical ethics. It's clear, and the people who are doing this either were never taught medical ethics in medical school, or they were taught some sort of a radically new form of ethics. Dr. Rima, when you were in medical school, was there a discussion of medical ethics?
Are you kidding?
Ah.
Surely you jest.
I mean,
Surely you jest.
They must have talked about the Hippocratic Oath and the oath you actually were going to take.
You know, the Hippocratic Oath is nonsense. It says that you will not cut for gallstones. You will not give a woman a pessary or an anti-conception technology.
Right. I understand.
You will not. You will take care of your teachers in their old age. You will teach their sons without charge, not their daughters, of course. Daughters didn't get taught much of anything. And you will, under no circumstance, give poison to any man. Well, first of all, that suggests you could poison women, but I suspect it meant any person.
Right, and it could be a
second
translation.
of all, that means the entire pharmaceutical cornucopia would be off limits to you. So the Hippocratic Oath is well beloved as a theoretical construct, but it has absolutely no meaning. As I've often said, I actually took the Oath of Maimonides because that's what my medical school chose to use, and I'd like to find the Oath of Maimonides.
Okay, that's really good. Absolutely. While you do that, I'm going to talk a little bit more about informed consent, because I believe informed consent is at the heart of the defense of conscience against forced vaccination. I think that obviously the science is important, but the science does not trump the morality. And it doesn't matter. Let's assume for a moment that the science is real. Let's assume for a moment that nobody ever has a vaccine injury, that there is no destruction of the immune system by vaccines, that all that vaccines do is prevent disease. We won't say how long it prevents a disease. It's not. We all know it's not permanent. We got to weigh that against the principle of informed consent. And I believe that in weighing fundamental human rights, the convenience of the society or the convenience of the government weigh nothing. And that's exactly what we're dealing with here, because we are dealing with something called the Global Health Security Initiative, or the mentality behind that initiative that views all of us as a form of chattel to be culled. We are the herd. There's herd immunity, which of course is nonsense, but we are the herd to be culled. That would seem to be the current theory, and it's very clearly set out at the Global Health Security Initiative, which is a private-public partnership associated with the UN, run by two proteges of the Secretary General. All the usual suspects belong, all the foundations and government agencies that are involved in pandemic control. And of course, the usual suspects all subscribe to the theory. And the theory as espoused by the people who run the organization, duly published in peer-reviewed journals. The most cost-effective way, say they, to deal with pandemics is for there to be less vectors and victims. You see, we're all vectors or victims or both. A vector delivers the disease, a victim receives it. The best way to, the most cost-effective way, not that they didn't say best, most cost-effective way of dealing with it is to make sure there are less vectors and victims. That means to save people from pandemic, we have to have less people.
No, to save the world from pandemics,
Oh, to
we
save
have to
the
have less
economics,
people.
to save the global elites' economic viability.
Right.
That's it.
Let
Got
me
it.
read you, by
It's
the way, the
culling.
oath of
It's the
Maimonides
culling of
and
the
the oath
herd.
of Hippocrates.
That
Let me start with the oath of Hippocrates. This is what people think physicians hold themselves to and are held to. Here is the Hippocratic oath. And if it doesn't completely fit with your sensibilities, that's because it has nothing to do with modern sensibilities. I swear by Apollo the physician. I don't remember most people swearing much by Apollo the physician, but doctors do. I swear by Apollo the physician and Asclepius the surgeon, likewise Hygeia and Panacea, those are two goddesses, and call all the gods and goddesses to witness that I will observe and keep this underwritten oath to the utmost of my power and judgment. I will reverence my master who taught me the art. Equally with my parents, will I allow him things necessary for his support and consider his sons my brothers. I will teach them my art without reward or agreement. That means without tuition in medical school, okay? And I will impart all my acquirement, instructions, and whatever I know to my master's children as to my own, and likewise to all my pupils, who shall bind and tie themselves by a professional oath, but to none oath. So this is a secret cabal of the initiate, and nobody else gets to know.
Let's see. Consider how in this case, religion is being used to reinforce some sort of professionalism. The goddess is hygiene, is hygienics. The ancients knew about hygiene, of course, and it took people in the 16, 17, 1800s a long time to figure out hygiene. Very
Yes,
interesting.
and they had a hard time, a la Semmelweis, with
Yeah.
regard to healing the sick. But he says he's not going to teach anybody else
Right.
except his master's children and
Hey,
his own.
that hasn't changed.
His craft, right?
Hasn't
With regard
changed.
to healing the sick, I will devise and order for them the best diet. Excuse me? I will devise and order for them the best diet according to my judgment and means, and I will take care that they suffer no hurt or damage. Well, whoops, there goes chemotherapy and radiation. Yeah. Nor shall any man nor shall any man's entreaty prevail upon me to administer poison to anyone. No more drugs. Neither will I counsel any man to do so. Moreover, I will give no sort of medicine to any pregnant woman with a view to destroy the child. So abortion is out, out, out. Further, I will comport myself and use my knowledge in a godly manner. Haven't seen a lot of that. This brings to mind Offit having a problem here. I will not cut for gallstones, but will commit that affair entirely to the surgeons.
Oh, okay.
Whatever
a little
house
division
I
here between the god of surgery and the god of physicians, Apollo and
surgeons
Asclepius.
were not physicians. Surgeons were barbers. Surgeons did other things like bloodletting. Yeah. Whatsoever house I may enter, my visit shall be for the convenience and advantage of the patient, and I will willingly refrain from doing any injury or wrong from falsehood, and so you can't recommend chemotherapy. This is all chemotherapy's all over this thing. Yeah. And in an especial manner from acts of an amorous nature, whatever may be the rank of those who it may be my duty to cure, whether mistress or servant, bond or free. Whatever, in the course of my practice, we don't have a lot of bond people running around at this point.
They're all in prisons.
They're all in prisons, right? Yeah. Whatever in the course of my practice I may see or hear, even when not invited, whatever I may happen to obtain knowledge of, if it be not proper to repeat it, I will keep sacred and secret. within my own breast, kind of like my medical knowledge. If I faithfully observe this oath, may I thrive and prosper in my fortune and profession, and live in the estimation of posterity, or on breach thereof, may the reverse be my fate. Now, let me read you the oath of Maimonides. I could never take the oath of Hippocrates, but I
But
could take
Dr.
and did
Rima,
take.
but for women's reproductive choice, the world that spoke to seems to be a much more natural world when it comes to health than
Well,
the
they
current
did do
one.
the diet thing, but of course it was all secret, and it was
Yeah,
only
yeah.
for
Oh no, I
sons.
understand why you
And
couldn't take it. I'd love to
you
hear the
know,
one you did take.
pardon me.
I'd love to hear the one you did take.
The one I did take, and I took happily, by the way,
Good.
says, the eternal providence has appointed me to watch over the life and health of thy creatures. May the love for my art actuate me at all time. May neither avarice nor miserliness, nor thirst for glory, or for a great reputation engage my mind. For the enemies of truth and philanthropy could easily deceive me and make me forgetful of my lofty aim of doing good for thy children. May I never see in the patient anything but a fellow creature in pain, which certainly makes depopulation difficult, right?
Right.
Grant me the strength, time, and opportunity always to correct what I have acquired, always to extend its domain. For knowledge is immense, and the spirit of man can extend indefinitely to enrich itself daily with new requirements. In other words, I have to keep learning because the science is never settled. Back to the oath. Today, he can discover. So it says, the spirit of man can extend indefinitely to enrich itself daily with new requirements. Today, he can discover his errors of yesterday, and tomorrow he can obtain a new light on what he thinks himself sure of today. We must continue to learn, to grow, and to discard the error of the past. And then he goes on to say, O God, thou hast appointed me to watch over the life and death of thy creatures. Here am I, ready for my vocation, and now I turn unto my calling. Now that gives me goosebumps.
Very nice. Yep. Very, very powerful. And again, how to use culture to moderate human behavior in a way that's going to be, less egotistical. Very good.
Now, on a very hopeful note, I just saw an article which says top medical school, that's Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York, revamps requirements to sit down and put your seatbelt on, revamps requirements to lure English majors. They say that the pre-med students make terrible doctors. The literature students, the medieval history students, the public policy and humanities students make really good doctors. And in terms of the science, the whole pre-medical curriculum is irrelevant to modern medicine. It was created by Abram Flexner on the instruction of John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie when he wrote the Flexner Report to stratify and create filters to keep non-academically certified people out of medicine. And so the entire curriculum has little or nothing to do with medical excellence. Any science you need, you learn in medical school. Anything else was just a series of hoops that you had to jump through. I was an English major. I went to medical school, and I would say this is exactly correct. By the end of the second year, it says, the professors at Mount Sinai College of Medicine can't tell the difference between who was and who was not a humanities student. And they say that the humanities students change the pre-med students dramatically through their interactions during the course of their education. You go, Mount Sinai Medical School. That's
Indeed.
hopeful.
Indeed. Very good, Doctor. Well, This has been an interesting program so far. We are exploring, and folks, you are listening to the Dr. Rima Truth Reports over Veterans Truth Network. This is the second half of the program. We interviewed Catherine Frompovich, investigative reporter, in the first half, and we've been talking about this and that here in the second half. Friday early evening here in Northeast New Jersey, where I am. A little later in the evening, where Dr. Rima is in Santiago de Chile, but opposite sides of the season. As I head into summer and Dr. Rima heads into winter.
I would like to talk about something dear to our hearts,
Yes.
but rarely talked about together.
Go ahead.
Well, we talk about it together when we speak to each other,
Mm-hmm.
but we haven't talked about it together in public, and so I'd like to do that. We all know, or if you don't know, then I think there's something really, really wrong with your data set, but anybody who's looking at the science objectively knows that vaccines are dangerous, knows that they don't work, knows that the science upon which they rest is both contrived, connived, and outdated. So they really have no place in a health strategy. Or a health-oriented strategy. They have every place in a sickness-oriented health strategy. But then the question is, okay, what do I do if a bioengineered, a genetically engineered, or otherwise newly aggressive organism shows up? Or what do I do if some unengineered but very aggressive organism like cholera shows up? What do I do? How do I protect myself? If vaccines are not part of my protection structure, what do I do? And this is the point at which I say, Ralph, what I'm about to say has to be moderated and modified according to the FDA, according to the law of the United States, so that I'm supposed to self-censor myself and not say what I am about to say. But what I'm going to say is what we're not allowed to say. And I'm going to make it very clear that the FDA says we can't say this, so I'm not saying it. I'm saying what the FDA would not want me to say, so I'm not saying it, but I'm giving you an educational, informative lecture on what the FDA says we can't say, and I'm not saying it. Okay? Is that clear?
Yes, Dr. Rima, that's clear. This is purely for the purpose of exploring our understanding of what the FDA says we can and cannot say.
Right. And you, as a regulatory attorney, can correct me if I say anything that the FDA actually says we can say.
Well, of course,
Okay?
they change their definitions all the time, so one can never be sure. But yeah,
One can never be
comment.
sure,
Yeah.
yes. Moving goalposts are not designed for the opposition team. So here's the legal part. You probably think, that the First Amendment protects your speech. You think you could say, for instance, something like Ebola is cured by nanosilver 10 parts per million. But you couldn't. You're not allowed to say that. And the reason that the First Amendment doesn't protect that, and let's leave aside for the moment whether it's true, we have seen evidence that's absolutely compelling to us that suggests that it's true, both scientific and clinical evidence, but leave aside for the moment whether or not it's true. If you wanted to say nanosilver 10 parts per million cures Ebola, you couldn't do that legally in the United States. Why couldn't you do it? Ralph, you're the attorney. Tell us why I couldn't say nanosilver cures Ebola or prevents it from developing if I wanted to.
Because Congress in 1994 said that you can't talk about dietary supplements and use the words diagnose, prescribe, treat, prevent, cure, mitigate. There's a handful of the words you can't use. They declared that. That declaration, of course, is unconstitutional. We have an action pending with the FDA, which we suspect will eventually turn into litigation, but we're waiting for the FDA's response. We've asked them. We've said to them that we have a right to speak freely about about nutrients and health, and they don't think we do. We believe the courts ultimately will agree with us, and I got to spend a minute or two talking about the history of speech about health, and see if help our listeners get a little perspective. So back in 1905, I believe it was. I may be off a year or two on some of the dates of some of these cases, so I apologize. About around 1905, Congress passed the first law that really empowered the FDA. It empowered the FDA to do a lot of overseeing of things that are in interstate commerce. And in 1911, the Supreme Court heard a case about the restrictions on speech that the FDA thought the law allowed it to engage in. And the Supreme Court held that there was no authority in the law to allow the FDA to censor opinion speech. Now, there's no constitutional issue because the law doesn't have any words in it that give the FDA authority to censor speech. A year later, the Congress changed the law slightly to arguably give them authority to censor speech, and that issue has never been back up to the Supreme Court in that way since. We're now talking about 100 and some odd years later. Well, is that settled law? It's 100 years, And the answer is, well, not exactly. Because let's just do a little fast forward in time from 1911 to 1933, the next time the FDA got a major boost in power. As you know, our friend Ron Paul has said in the past, giving the FDA more power is giving it more power to abuse. And I think that's very, very true. But so we go fast forward, they're getting more power in 1933, and the compounding pharmacists go to their congressman and say, wait a minute, do you mean we're going to have to get FDA approval every time we compound a medication for a client? And the FDA and the Congress people said, oh, well, I guess we don't mean to destroy your business. So, oh, no, you can still keep on compounding, but you are not allowed to speak about what you compound. You can put the word compounding pharmacy on the outside of your store, but you can't tell the public what you compound. And so from 1933, that was the law. There was a restriction on speech about these substances and health. All right. And so when we go forward a little bit longer, a little further, and it's 1994, 60 years later, thereabouts, and Congress adopts the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, DSHEA, which allows us for the first time to speak about health and food and not run up against this 100-year-old FDA attempt to control speech about food and health. And we accepted DSHEA. I lobbied for DSHEA. I went down to Washington with my then 6-year-old son and wife, and we lobbied in the halls of Congress, and we went to rallies and all that good stuff. And we got the law passed. We knew it was flawed, and we didn't like a lot of the law, especially the part that said that every single bottle of vitamins has to have certain magic words on it. It has to say, not intended. And it's got to listen to that word, not intended. Well, who's not intending it? Presumably the person who's making this label, who's putting the words on this label. The label owner does not intend the product to diagnose, prescribe for, treat, mitigate, prevent, cure any disease. That's the cost that was taken from us, if you will, for being able to say anything about dietary supplements. We were not allowed to use certain words. That goes to the heart of what Dr. Rima was talking about earlier about nanosilver. Not allowed to say those words. Now, fast forward a few more years. It's now 2002, and the lawsuit before the court is Thompson versus Western States. Thompson is the Secretary of Health Secretary of the Secretary overseeing the FDA, and he is sued actually, and the way the federal court things work out, sometimes the person who's doing the appealing ends up as the first name on the lawsuit. But he was involved in litigation with some pharmacies, some compounding pharmacies, and they said the censorship from the 1933 law is unlawful. It's always been unlawful. It's always violated our First Amendment rights. Get rid of it. There's no, statute of limitations on when I can assert my constitutional rights. And the Supreme Court in 2002 said, we've long held that the government has no interest, no legitimate interest in preventing people from making what the government thinks are bad decisions with truthful commercial information. Prior to that, there was some thought that the federal courts, were going to enforce a standard that said that commercial speech somehow was not protected speech. Well, now, since that case and a few others, it's pretty clear that the modern Supreme Court is getting the point that speech is speech and no law is no law, and commercial speech is going to be protected. So as long as you're telling the truth, as long as you're speaking the truth. And, that is, in the words of a jurist that I discussed this issue with, the sine qua non of compelled speech is truth. If Congress can compel us to speak, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If I can be compelled to speak, then I can only be compelled to speak the truth. And to tell me that I must say my intent is not to do something is to compel me to express an opinion that's not true. That may not be my intent. To tell me that the law requires that I have an intent is actually insane. I mean, how can the law determine what my mental state of mind is required to be? This is way beyond an invasion of privacy. It's really almost a metaphysical invasion of person.
Unless, of course, it's not just your body that belongs to the state, but your mind as well. Now, suppose your opinions belong to the state, and there are correct opinions and incorrect opinions. And the correct opinions are those that are sanctioned, for instance, the ones that you're allowed to say in public, like vaccines are safe and effective. And the ones that you're not allowed to say in public, the ones that are addressed as or classified as incorrect and politically incorrect, are not to be shared and therefore not to be thought. Then you have to have those intentions because you're said to have those intentions, and you're said to have those intentions. So when we get to this invasion, this is our intention when we sell this vitamin. We didn't intend it to prevent, treat, cure, mitigate, or diagnose anything because the FDA said we couldn't intended to do those things and that we didn't. Then suddenly we are beyond philosophical, Ralph, and we're into a matter of inner psychic and, if you will, spiritual freedom. Does the state own our inner psychic and spiritual realm?
Wasn't that the great battle? Religion? Wasn't that the great battle of the 20th century? On one side, the totalitarians, led by Nazi Germany and communist Russia and China. Wasn't that the great battle of the 20th century? On the one side, Cthulhu and his minions, and on the other side, I don't know. It's hard to tell, actually.
Yeah, well, it was the great. Think about Maoist China. If you didn't have the right opinions, you would be one of the many millions who were re-educated and killed in the Great Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward. Think about Stalinist Russia. How many people were killed for their alleged attitudes that were incorrect in terms of the Stalinist ideology? What's the number? 30 million, 40 million, 70 million? There are a lot of millions in there. And among the people who were killed because they did not have the correct attitude, they were presumed to have the incorrect attitude toward the state, were those people, when the Bolsheviks came in and they purged and purged and purged, were those people who were unusually attractive young people. They were presumed to have politically incorrect ideology, or they wouldn't have been particularly attractive young people. Now, you may say, wait, that doesn't make any sense. No, none of this.
The purpose of terror is to terrorize, to actually quote Lenin.
Exactly. The purpose of terror is to terrorize. And I want to bring out another fact.
And think of that, by the way, folks, in the context of the measles pandemic.
One of the things that we can't say is that if you have a well-functioning immune system that is supported by the proper nutrients, then you won't get sick, or if you do get sick, you can handle the disease. So nutrients cannot be said to prevent, treat, cure, mitigate, or diagnose any disease or illness. Therefore, if you have a nutrient like O, for example, randomly chosen, nanosilver 10 parts per million, specifically like, again, randomly chosen, Dr. Rima recommends nanosilver 10 parts per million, which, by the way, I can tell you she recommends because she has seen the clinical effects of it and has read the studies, more than 1,000 of them, on its extraordinary impact. But you can't say that if you have this kind of nutrient available to you, specifically Dr. Rima recommends nanosilver 10 parts per million, then you are much less likely to get any disease. And if you do get that disease, if you have an infection by a disease organism or a parasite, and you take this stuff, you are much less likely to have the full form of it, and much more likely to have a mild case of it, or a milder case of it. But I couldn't say that. I couldn't tell you that if you went to www.nsfmarketplace.com, that would stand for Natural Solutions Foundation, marketplace.com, and were to order nanosilver and use it as directed in my protocol, I couldn't tell you that it might prevent, treat, cure, mitigate, or diagnose disease. Well, I can't think how it would diagnose disease, but I couldn't tell you that because the FDA has taken away our right, along with the Congress, the spineless, gutless, worthless Congress of the United States, which unfortunately seems to be the only one we have. So the spineless, gutless, worthless Congress of the United States passed the law that said no nutrient or natural substance can be talked about in context with the words, or in connection with the words, treat, prevent, cure, or diagnose, and the FDA, ever friendly, added the word mitigate. So I'm not saying that if you want to protect your immune system and you want to prevent, treat, mitigate, or cure disease, you would use nanosilver 10 parts per million, because I'm not allowed to say that. If I were allowed to say it, I would, but we're operating under the laws of the United States rather than a free country.
Well, now there's another way of expressing what's going on, and that is that what nanosilver does is exactly what any nutrient does, which is to support homeostasis, the normal balance of the body. It actually supports normal cell membrane impermeability. Now that's some long words there, but they're words worth parsing. Our bodies are made up of living cells. In fact, all living things are made up of living cells, tiny, tiny living cells. And the pathogens that can attack them, like viruses, bacteria, yeast, and others, are also tiny little cells. In the case of viruses, they're not really cells, they're just sort of information packets. And, our body contains at any given moment trillions of foreign bacteria, viruses, lots of yeast cells, and various similar critters. And it's, they're part of our normal microbiome, part of the normal structure and function of our bodies. That's not a disease. You don't need to be sterile. And anyone in the past who thought that somehow the inside of the human body is supposed to be sterile is a little crazy. You don't have to be sterile. You just have to have a normal balance. It's called homeostasis. And that's what nutrients do. And in the case of nanosilver, 10 parts per million, it's been shown to support normal cell impermeability, so that when you put living cells in a petri dish and you put various viruses in, like Ebola even, and you put nanosilver 10 parts per million, or I think you put the nanosilver in first, the viruses never penetrate the cell wall, so they can never replicate. There's no disease unless the viruses are able to replicate. So it's not a matter of preventing a disease. It's a matter of there being the normal conditions that hold all diseases in check are working normally. It's nothing to do with treating a disease, with preventing a disease. It's all about simply supporting normal cell membrane impermeability. And it does so exquisitely. We're talking about an almost complete, if not complete, blockage of any response by the body. There's just no replication that goes on. So it's a completely different thing. It's nothing to do with the treatment of disease, which is all about changing the body, suppressing various enzyme systems, suppressing symptoms. That's what drugs do. Uh, Nutrients support normal structure and function. And that's all nanosilver does. So, Dr. Rima, you don't have to talk about the things that the FDA doesn't want you to talk about.
I'm so relieved because, I was on the verge of criminal behavior by telling the truth in a context in which
Well,
the truth is
but
forbidden.
that would be using medical terms. And unless the courts overturn the DSHEA disclaimer law, and remember all the censorship that the FDA tries to impose on talking about health and food basically arises from that requirement. So that whenever you have a dietary supplement, the label owner has already said, I don't intend this. And if the FDA can show that that's what they did intend, well, now it's mislabeled, and the full force of the federal authorities come bouncing down on top of the label owner's head. And that, of course, is why it's so important for us to champion the right of free speech when it comes to speech about health. What did the Supreme Court say in that case in 2002? After it overturned a 60 or 70-year-old act of censorship, it said, we've long held the government has no interest in stopping people from making what the government thinks are bad decisions with truthful commercial information. Conversely, by the way, it works both ways. There's no legitimate governmental interest in preventing people from deciding not to be vaccinated with truthful information. It doesn't matter what the settled science is or is not. Very clearly, I have a First Amendment right to associate, a right to free speech, and those are both part of my right of informed consent. So it's not, as though it's just an international right. There's a very important state level right, if you will, involved. Dr. Rima, we're reaching the last 10 minutes of the Dr. Rima Truth Reports.
We have to be able to speak truth. We have to be able to ask questions. We have to be able to debunk falsehood. We have to be able to debate what the best interpretation of the science means. We have to be able to differ. If we can't, if we have only political correctness, if we have only chosen truths, if we have only settled science, and let me say again, if the science is settled, it is religion, not science. Science is never settled. The purpose and proposition of science is to unsettle, not to settle. Anything that says it is settled science is a religious belief. Vaccinism is a religious belief. Contrailism. Oh, there are only contrails up there. There couldn't be chemtrails because I would have heard of them. You have heard of them. You just are too sewn into your own concrete liner of thought to acknowledge the reality that you're being offered. And so that kind of thing, and you've heard me tell this story before, that kind of thing goes back to the same kind of bias in which you assume that if you don't know something, it's because there's nothing to know, which is, pretty stupid. That goes back to the chairman of the French Academy of Sciences in the day when one of the great questions of science was whether rocks could fall from the sky, meteors and meteorites. And the French Academy of Science president said, nonsense. No such thing could happen. So another member of the French Academy of Science, who was an abbot of a monastery in the south of France, happened to witness a fall of meteorites. And when they had cooled sufficiently, he packed them up and he sent them to the president of the French Academy with a description of what he, one of the elite scientists of the world, had seen. It happened at this time, on this day, the atmospheric conditions were like this, and they fell, and they were hot, and then they cooled, and blah, blah, blah. And the French Academy of Sciences president, who was the most elite scientist in the world, kind of like the head of the Nobel Academy in Karolinska Institute in Sweden, he had the rocks destroyed and discarded. And he wrote back to the abbot and he said, "My dear abbot, rocks do not fall from the sky. I am the president of the French Academy of Sciences. If rocks fell from the sky, I would know it. I have had your samples destroyed."
Total insanity on a certain level, but something that's understandable as entrenched interests seek to protect themselves at all costs. And as we began the program a while ago, talking about the president of the Natural Solutions Foundation, Major General Bert Stubblebine, and his recent comments on, you got to go, folks, to www.drrima, that's DRRIMA, Dr. Rima, truthreports.com, and look at the blog. Read General Bert's blogs, important. He calls what the elite is doing right now reckless endangerment. You need to understand why. You need to understand why he has been writing about the great culling beginning now. Go to that website, www.drrimatruthreports.com. Very important to read the blog.
What will the world look like after the great culling, when 10% of the population remains on the planet? Very interesting question. And if you want to know exactly what it will look like, I have a free ebook for you. Go to www.truthabout, there's that word again, truthaboutagenda21.com, truthaboutagenda21.com. Download the free book, and you'll see what the elitists have been preparing. It's a three-tier society in a very short pyramid. There'll be the global elites, the neo-aristocrats at the top, surrounded by their servants and servitors, and below them the technicians, autistic, limited scope, high-functioning autistic workers. Now, there'll be enough of those because of the vaccines, which Paul G. King, an outstanding scholar and one of our favorite people, feels the vaccine protocols are being tinkered with to produce in large numbers. And in fact, Vodafone, the largest telecommunications company in the world, and Microsoft and Goldman Sachs and SAP and a number of other companies and the British government have identified autistic workers as the ideal workers because they can't combine and make unions. They don't have enough social skills. They don't ask questions. They like routine. They're very simply satisfied. They can be hired as disabled workers, so they're cheap as dirt, and they're replaceable. They are interchangeable. So that's what's in store if they have their way. We, those of us who survive, will be exposed to behavioral vaccines. We will be exposed to the compression of all of us into transit villages in which occupy 1% of the world's landmass. The other 99% allegedly will be turned over to rewild, will be allowed to return to nature, and will never be mined or used or driven upon or skied upon or farmed. You want to bet? And the elites will rule this whole system. You will live in a
tiny house,
dwelling,
right?
a 200 and what is the number?
280, 260?
216 square foot dwelling, which is about 16 meters on a side, and that will be your total living space. You will eat what you're told to eat. You will live where you're told to live. You will work where you're told to work, if you work. You will not have a car. You will not have any other private property available to you that doesn't fit into your little bitty dwelling. And at the same time, if you want to travel further than you can bicycle or walk, you will need a special permit to get on the light rail that will move people around the transit villages. And that's the entire population of the planet. 1/10 of the current value or current number, and totally controlled biologically, situationally. Children will be undereducated because well-educated children use more than their fair share of the resources of the planet under the current system. Children will be underfed because fully fed children attain their full genetic potential and use more than their fair share. They're taller, they're bigger, and they take up more room and resources. And we can't have that. But do you want to bet that the elite's children will not be subject to those restrictions? Now, am I making up this dystopian universe? No, 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 no.
And Dr. Rima, we have about 1 minute.
Yes,
and
that is in fact what Agenda 21 says.
Right.
Truth about agenda21.com. Vaccines will reduce, cull, and stupefy the population if you allow them. Ralph, give some of our tiny URLs where people can go and stop this.
Go to tinyurl.com, push back here. Push back here will get you to a web page that has all of our active action items on it, including several having to do with vaccination. One for people in the United States, one for people in Australia. Soon, action items that'll cover other countries as well. We are using that system that allows you to actually have up-to-date access to the emails of public servants so you can help educate them. And as we come on to the end of another Dr. Rima Truth Reports, I want to thank you all. I want to thank Veterans Truth Network, VTNradio.com, for their help. We really enjoyed our guest for the first hour, Catherine Frompovich. It's been an interesting discussion. This will be archived, and you can find the archives on YouTube at tinyurl.com/DRTR archive. DRTR, Dr. Rima Truth Reports. Thank you, Dr. Rima.
Thank you. And remember, folks, the Dr. Rima Truth Reports is on VTN Radio Network 5 days a week from 5 to 7 Eastern. Join us then.